Hello, everyone. This is Tim. Welcome to North and South podcast. This is a Hope Street podcast, and I am with Ste, who was on episode 23. And Ste is a volunteer at Hope Street, and he's actually just been doing a little bit of counselling with me over something that's going on in my life. So, great fella. He helps people at Hope Street with various things in their lives in terms of coaching and counselling, etc. And he's just gave me some stellar advice. So, he speaks very well. He's been involved at Hope Street for well over a year now, I think about 18 months, and he's a big member of the group. So, Ste, thanks for coming back on. We are going to talk about some quite heavy issues, maybe relating to suicide attempts, drugs, and violence, which I always say before any podcast where we discuss these things. But in our last podcast, we discussed your history of violent crime and heavy addiction, heavy drug use. And we just got up to a point where one day you just kind of were going into work and said, I might not come home tonight. And you just literally turned the car around and walked away from it all and almost started a new life. Do you want to tell us just where you went to from there? Did you get involved in a business of your own, or what happened from that point? Because it was a huge day in your life, wasn't it?
What happened, Tim, was it created a lot of problems, to be honest with you, when I left the industry that I was in. People weren't happy with what I'd done and things like that. So it was a bit of a difficult time. I was still involved in drugs. I was taking drugs as a coping mechanism. And what had happened is I started developing a bit of a conscience for the things that I'd done. And it was like I struggled with that. And that sort of manifested in itself, and it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger in my life. So created like mini breakdowns. I was hospitalised for a number of times during that time, but I didn't have any real understanding as to the reasons why. That all of a sudden I was developing a conscience, whereas beforehand I was like some sick psychopath, doing the things that I did. So I ended up having some medication. I had counselling, and I carried on, and as I say, I struggled for a number of years. One of the things that was dear to my heart and what I liked doing was coaching boxing. I was involved with boxing as a child, and then as an adult, and then sort of progressed into the coaching side of things, and it sort of leveled things for me. I was more of a nicer person. I had a focus in life, and my lads were boxing, so I was encouraging them, I was coaching them, and they were doing well. So my family life had sort of turned around, and I was getting on with my missus a lot better. My relationship with my kids was a lot better. Because bear in mind, I was an animal for years. Do you know what I mean? And they were like on pins sometimes as to which way I was going to turn over certain, anything really. Do you know what I mean? So it was a massive change in my life. It was for the good. But as I say, I had a couple of breakdowns in that period of time, and I ended up in hospital. It was a real alien environment to me that when I first went into one, it was like, oh my
So
God.
these are sectionings, yeah? Sectionings under the Mental Health Act.
Yeah. Well, it was like, I think it's called a 138 or something. It's a 24-hour section, and what they do is they assess you in them first 24 hours, and they decide whether they're going to section you for 30 days or 6 months. So initially it'll be 30 days, and then they assess you again while you're in hospital. But I went in as a voluntary patient, to be honest with you. I avoided the major sectioning, so it gave me more leeway when I was in hospital. So when I was in a better frame of mind, and I was focusing right and things like that, I could have leave to go to the shop and leave to go home some nights, you know what I mean? But getting back to when I first went into hospital, it was, as I say, it was totally gobsmacking. It was, you just wondering what's going to be there when you turn up. Do you know what I mean? but the staff and that are usually really good. In all the places I've been, the staff have been absolutely excellent. They're there to talk to you. They explain everything from stage one right the way through. You have a medical when you first go in. It's a full MOT, to an ECG. They'll do your blood pressure. They'll do a meds check with you, height and weight and all that type of thing. Do you know what I mean? And they'll assign a nurse to you. So that nurse is the one that's going to be sort of in your time there, is your liaison with other things that are going on in the place. They're there to talk through your difficulties and things like that, you know what I mean? And explain how the hospital runs and the ward runs.
Do you know, just going back, back in the 90s when I was growing up, my imagination of being sectioned under to do with mental health was like based on kind of, I think for many people, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the film, or some belief that if you had a mental health problem, there was something really, really wrong with you, that you didn't want to tell people, that you would end up in these prisons where you've lost control. We're going to challenge that a little bit later, but what was the breakdown like? You were still taking drugs. You were away from the violent crime, still taking drugs as a almost stealth medication. Is that right? And then you had these breakdowns. So what was the breakdown like? How would you explain what the breakdown was like to someone?
I just became lost in what I was doing. I was ruminating a lot. I'd sit and isolate myself on my own. I wouldn't speak to my family. When you put things in boxes, right, you're packing them in and packing them in and packing them in, and eventually all those feelings and thoughts and everything else will spill out, and it just your brain just wanders completely. You can't concentrate on one thing alone. It's as if you're on a roulette wheel, and every section on the roulette wheel is a thought, which will lead into a different thought. So you weren't rational about things. You were, I'd say, probably a bit hot-tempered, but you couldn't be rational about anything. And then suicidal thoughts came into play, and that was a lot with me. As I decided that, like, I wasn't good enough to live anymore, that I didn't want to live, and that I was putting my family through hell, and I've done all that, and they deserve better. They'd be better off without me, and all those thoughts came in, and I ended up taking over. Like, I planned an overdose, because what I thought is I don't want to go and hang myself and leave trauma to somebody else that I've already got trauma for. So what my plan was is to take a load of paracetamol and wreck my liver. So therefore, that'll be my passage out. So that was the one thought I did have clarity in, is in how to do it and how not to create trauma for somebody else.
While that happened, did you make the decision yourself that you needed help, or did your family do it, or did a medical or a health professional? How did you end up being institutionalized?
Well, my partner, she found me with a load of paracetamol that I'd already taken. So her port of call was to phone an ambulance, and then it just went from there onwards. So, like, you end up in A&E, and that's not a nice place to be when you've got mental health issues, because they don't seem to be able to cope with it. You sort of put to one side, your head's spinning in all different directions, and you've got all these different people in with different ailments, and you're sitting there thinking, well, I shouldn't really be here. I should be somewhere else by now. Do you know what I mean? So it's a real daunting time. And then you go through the assessment stage, and then you get admitted. You'll see a psychiatrist within 2 or 3 days. It's called a review, so they'll talk to you over your issues, and they'll decide on what action that needs to be taken from there on. I've had my first section was only for a week and a half.
And was this a voluntary one?
This is a voluntary one, yeah.
So they said to you, do you want to come in, before they make the decision? There's an avenue there for you to go in. Is that right?
Usually what it is, right, is they put an option on the table for you, right, is 1, you can come in voluntary, or 2, we'll just section you. So it's always better to say, no, I'll come in voluntary. That's what happens.
And does that give you more power then? Do you have, as you said, do you have a bit more leeway because you made the decision to come in? You have a little bit more independence in there.
Yeah, you've got a bit more independence, a bit more control over what's going to happen. I got assigned a CPN, which is like a community practitioner nurse, and he was a dual diagnosis nurse. So a dual diagnosis nurse is one that will have, like my issues were mental health and addiction at that time. So both things needed addressing. So I had this nurse that would come out and visit me on a regular basis. And in the end, I started doing peer mentoring with him. I used to go out with this nurse and see other patients of similar characteristics as me, right? Because I could speak well and talk well, and I had an understanding of mental health and people's problem and addiction. I was quite useful to them, and I enjoyed it to a degree. And I got back on level terms, and I'm back in the community, back home. Life was sort of dull, if you get what I'm saying, because I had this mad life prior to the breakdowns, and I was dead busy. It was like I wasn't good enough anymore, so I looked for something that was going to be more creative. So I was still doing the coaching and the boxing. And one of my mum passed away and left me some money. So one of my hobbies that I've always wanted to get into was photography. So I bought myself a camera and I started shooting pictures at the boxing shows. And I thought, you know what? I could sell these pictures to the boxers. And that's what I started doing. I started videoing the fights and taking still photographs of the boxing matches. And I started doing quite well with it. So from there on, I thought, oh, yeah, I've got a little niche here. I've got a little job. This will keep me steady. But me being me, just doing the boxing shows wasn't enough because I've got an addictive personality. I need to push myself and push myself. So what I did from then was I thought, right, I'll get myself a little office. So I went looking, got myself a little office. Then I got another one, which was next door to the one I had. So I made that into a studio. So then I started doing portraits and professional shoots. So that took me on. And then the next progression from that was weddings. And by this time, I had 5 staff working for me. I had 2 offices and a studio. So me being me again, this was over a period of time. I think it was about 3 or 4 years. It got to the stage. In 1 year, I had 56 weddings, which was absolutely a nightmare. It was because of the addictive personality and me not wanting to turn work away. It sort of snowballed, if you get what I mean. I went too far too quickly, and the staff that I took on were as qualified as what they said they were. So it created a lot of problems, and I got a bad reputation because the pictures were delayed and things like that. And it sort of set me right back to square one again. So I had another hospital admission from then, and I found that I had quite a regular time of year where I would dip and end up in hospital. So the business went, and then I just ended up back to square one, where I'm basically stuck in on ASA at the moment. Do you know what I mean? But then I found Hope Street. I went along to some of the meetings, and it was good. It sort of gave me a purpose again.
Yeah. So, do you know the ESA, is that a support allowance for someone who's experiencing difficulty? What's that called again? Sorry.
It's employment support allowance.
So ESA. When did the drugs stop in amongst all that? When did you move away from the direct chemical addiction?
Well, that I stopped 10 years ago. Well, 10, 12 years ago now.
And was the photography after that?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But it's interesting that you know that the addiction. I did a podcast which I've just released actually about addiction. even when you get rid of the illegal addictions and the legal addictions, there's addictive traits of personality that you're now fully aware of. Is that right? That you still see that in yourself?
Yeah. See, I wasn't aware of all this. So it took me a long time to sort of click into, well, the reasons why I am the way I am. As I said in the previous podcast that we've done, I had a really bad, poor upbringing, and that laid the field down for my futures, basically. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But I'm one of these type of people who I don't lie down easy. Do you know what I mean? So I push for things, and I look for hobbies, but I take them way too far. Like I say, I make models, I make Airfix models, and a number of other ones, and that keeps me on a level keel because I've got something to concentrate on. The photography was one of the things that I did and concentrated on that. When I found Hope Street, though, let me take you. I need to go right back to the beginning when I first got sectioned.
Yeah.
I went. I thought I was a real lunatic. That nobody had the same feelings as me, and I was on my own, and I was an absolute loon ball. And I went to a group meeting once. My CPN said to me, "Steve, this might do you good." So I went to this group meeting, and I sat there and I thought to myself, "I'm not going to say a word in here." I thought, "This is only for lunatics." This, and I sat there and I listened to people, and I thought, hang on a minute, I've done that. And then somebody else would say something, and I'd say, well, I've done that as well. So I was realising that I wasn't the only loony that's in the room, and that there's common traits amongst everybody. So it sort of opened my eyes, and it made me think, well, yes, there is hope at the end of the tunnel. Do you know what I mean? If you do follow the right line and take advice and do, you know, do better things. And that's when I decided to leave the drugs behind. And so that was, as I say, I'm 12 years clean now. And I'm a volunteer with Hope Street, and it gives me a really good feeling that I can actually be there and help other people. I think that's the main thing for me. If I can help someone else in their difficulties, well, that gives me a double whammy.
You've been fantastic since you've come in as well. Not only have you been leading some of the sessions, but your ability to speak to people, ask how people are, help them with various things. I know you've been doing a lot of work with people behind the scenes as well that other members of the group might not always appreciate. You've been involved in the opening of the new hub, and you've really been your contributions are bigger than the sum of the parts, but you can see how much you're benefiting from it when you come into the meetings, etc. It's a big part of your life. And I mean, I go to the Tuesday meetings every Tuesday, and for me, that's a key part of my week now. I like seeing the people there talking about the things that we talk about. I find it really helpful for me as well as someone who's had issues with depression. Just going back to when you were feeling really bad and your wife found you the paracetamol, etc. There's a lot of people who say like, oh yeah, we'll put some information in the notes, but you've got Samaritans who you can call. You can speak to maybe members of your family. You can be aware yourself that you're thinking about and planning a suicide, not just thinking of it, but actually planning it. That's the point when you then go, right, I need to get help. And what advice would you give to someone who's in that kind of dark way? What should they do if anyone finds themselves in that way where they're actually feeling that, no, I do actually want to end this or do something that I might regret later? What advice would you give to someone in the thick of it, as it were?
I think they need to talk, don't they? And reach out to anybody. There's no shame in needing help. That's one of the biggest stigmas that's going on, and people don't realise, and people suffer in silence. It's not that much of it is a big deal, mental health, but you can get help. There's people out there like myself, like you, Tim, who are there to help you and understand you, and they've been in the same boat as what you've been in. So if you look at them and say, well, hang on a minute, he's been in the same boat as me, but he's moved on, and his life's a lot better than it was, well, then their life can be the same. If they go, if they talk and be open, I think that's paramount. That I think
Yeah.
it really is.
Yeah, I think they often say men are less likely to reach out as well, and it's a higher suicide rate in men. But you've got your family, you've got friends, you've got Samaritans, you've got crisis teams, which you can call at hospitals. You can phone 999. But before you get to that crisis point as well, I mean, there's adverts going on at the moment. Like some companies are advertising like talk, about the importance of talking and dealing with the emotions. And I mean, I keep an emotional journal, which I find really helpful when things are on my mind. Like I did it this morning, things are doing me head in, I write them down and write them out. But reaching out, every time, I remember reading about people who've jumped up bridges, the ones who survived say, after I jumped, I changed my mind, and then I thought I'm going to die here, and then miraculously they survived. No one is ever in that state of mind permanently, are they? And I think the great tragedy is if you're successful, there's no way back, is there?
Well, that's right. Yeah, there's that. It's over, isn't it? I think you are right. I think sometimes it's a cry for help. It can be a cry for help, and sadly, it can be too far. Do you know what I mean? In what I'd say is to family members as well. So, you'll get family members saying, "Oh, I didn't know what was going on," or "He was so happy just beforehand, and I can't understand it." Right? Is when I made my plans, I was content that I knew what I was going to do. Do you know what I mean? So I had from an absolutely despairing time of being depressed and anxiety, I went into this sort of lull, and I was happy and I was content, if that makes sense, because I knew that all my pains were going to be over. Sadly, you need to look out for that as a person who's a partner or whatever, and say, for instance, is someone suffering from depression and they're really low, really bad, and they have been for a long time, and then all of a sudden snap out of it, and they're looking happy. That's the sign to watch, because they might have made a plan and be content with the plan, if that makes sense. About 2 years ago, a young lady that knew our family, knew my daughter, knew Kendall. She was at our house in the summer. She was playing TikTok with the baby. She was having a ball of a time. The next day, she went home and hung herself. And that to me shows, I was like that, questioning myself, why couldn't I have seen that before it happened?
Do you know, I've heard a few people say about that, there's almost like an exhilaration when you make the decision. And I've heard people say as well that, like, you can be fine, and then that night, or that mood descends on you, or whatever. But do you feel you're better now at knowing, oh, I'm in that place, I need to get help? Do you feel that you're better now at doing that?
I do. Yeah, I do. I know when I'm dipping now, and I'll speak to someone about it before things happen. The other day, I had 6 panic attacks in a row, and it was really draining, and it was ongoing. So the first thing I done was in the morning, I phoned the doctors up, and I got some medication to cope with it. I think meds are an important part of depression. They're not for everybody, but for the majority of people, they're there as a sticking plaster, and they do help you along. So in my sort of experience of them, and I've been on quite a few different meds, it's an important thing that we need to talk about as well.
Do you know the awareness or mindfulness of knowing when you're in a bad way and to get help? You've done a few voluntary sections since the first initial ones, and the voluntary one, you almost know, right, I need help, I'm going to go there voluntarily and get the help because I know I need it. Now, what's it like when you're in there? You said it's very supportive, but like, what kind of activities and things are they doing in there?
There's always activities going on every day. They do like art and crafts and things like that. They'll do mindfulness sessions where they have like a therapy room and things like that. They're quite well equipped now. But when you first walk in, there are people there who are really unwell, and it sets you back, and you think to yourself, "Oh, hang on a minute, how do I deal with this person?" But I've always, because I've got a strong personality and quite a big guy, no one ever bothers me in there. Do you know what I mean? So I was sort of left to my own devices, and I'd always partake in doing the classes and things like that because it was to your benefit. It was good, and you're getting assessed all the time while you're in there by all the staff. So they're seeing if you're coming out for your lunch, if you're coming out for your dinner, if you're getting up in the morning, if you're making your bed. These little things sort of like are pointers in when they discharge you, little point systems, so that they check over on absolutely everything you do. So if you go in there and stay in your room and you don't do things, and you're not benefiting yourself.
Sorry, you said as well that the staff, the nurses and that are the ones who are doing the watching and taking the notes, but do they then pass that on to the doctors who make the decisions? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, yeah. So as I say, if you're not doing nothing to help yourself, but then your stay is going to be a lot longer than what you would think it would be. The longest I've been in is 2 months. That was a heavy one. That one. I didn't at the beginning. I didn't want to engage in things, so it sort of prolonged my stay. But as I say, they're there as a necessity. If you're really unwell and you need to protect yourself from yourself, well, then that's the ideal place to be. But they're not for everybody. It's the last resort, basically, to keep you safe.
I think you've mentioned to me before that when you are in there, though, there's almost like a singularity of purpose about being there, that you can work on yourself. Is that something you found helpful? Like, I don't have to worry about external events.
That's right. Yeah, you're in a closed environment, aren't you? So the outside world is kept away from you. So therefore, you can think about your own thoughts and get yourself well in that way. You've got no pressures of family or anything else that might sort of put pressures on you. So all those pressures disappear, and then you've got time to heal yourself then.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it, isn't it? But the more you're engaged, the better you feel. The more you're engaged, the more likely you are to get out and see your loved ones and connections again.
Yeah.
So the nurses are monitoring you, and then the doctors will speak to you and try and get a bit more info about where you're at. Yeah. Right, Steve. So medication, forgive me if I'm incorrect here, but you're treated for anxiety and depression, which are like neurotic conditions, medium level kind of mental health issues. And then you've got a more serious mental health issue, which is a personality disorder. So are you being medicated for both of them at the same time? Is that how it works?
Yeah. I've got antipsychotics in my medication. So I have antidepressants, antipsychotics, and other medication. I've been on a number of medications over the years, and it's that you need to find the right one that's going to be suitable for yourself. Yeah. And I think the ones I'm on now keep me on a level keel.
Have you had a lot of messing with them through the years getting it right? Because it's quite hard, isn't it? Because they take a while to kick in, etc. Don't they?
Well, yeah. It's probably sometimes because the medication wasn't right. That's why a new hospital admission might have been in place. But I've been on these meds now for well over 12 months now, and these I still have me dips. Do you know what I mean? I was hospitalised a number of weeks ago, wasn't I? So they're not the total answer to everything. They can dull a situation and sort of keep you calm and things like that. Yeah. So I think without them, I wouldn't be able to process the thoughts that I got in my head.
So do you have any talking therapies or see any specialists at the same time?
Yeah, I have psychology, which helps out. I've had a number of those. And obviously, I've got borderline personality disorder and PTSD. Yeah. Now, the PTSD one, that's been my nightmare. Quite a cliche me saying that, because I used to have, nightmare after nightmare after.
So do you find that both of them help? And even though the side effects to the medications, you very much say, well, I need them to operate.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I don't have many side effects, to be honest with you. and I've been lucky in that way. Other people do suffer a lot of different side effects, but I've seen sort of swerve that side of things, and I'm getting the full benefit out of the medication.
That's good to
So
hear.
the only side effect I've got is that I put a lot of weight on, and the medications that are out there tend to do that for people.
Yeah, I know that's difficult for people to navigate, but I mean, the way I look at it with medications is you just think, well, is it better on them than off them? It's a simple metric, isn't it? And if you need them to survive, they're a big part of your treatment, aren't they?
Yeah. I think that's you've got to ask yourself that question. If I don't take these, where would it be without them? In what state would you be? Because I didn't see, I couldn't see, properly beforehand in like health wise and which way I was going to go. But now, I feel really good. I feel really good.
Yeah.
I've got both talking therapies, I've got medication, and I've got the right contacts. If I do dip, I've got the right contacts to contact.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to tie things together there, that statement. So Hope Street, they talk about now social prescribing, where they say getting involved in groups and organisations that tally with your interests and your values can help as well. So obviously Hope Street's been helping you out a lot, and you do a lot with Hope Street. But where are you at now then at the moment? Do you feel that you're at a good place compared to where you've been in the past in your life?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. I've got more options. I've got more tools in the toolbox now to deal with situations. If I go into a crisis mode, I can call on people that I need to talk. The fact that I can actually talk to other people and help them helps me.
Yeah.
And I'm a strong believer in that. And I think that's where Hope Street comes into place. There's a lot of like-minded people in there. They've all had journeys, and the journeys are going in different directions, but they've all got they've all got something in common. Is that they struggle, and they have depression, and I can see it when other people start dipping. Hopefully, I can step in and stop that before it manifests itself.
Yeah, and I think that's good, knowing that you're in those networks where people can support each other, because ultimately I think that's one of the biggest things with all this, is that if you've got networks of support, a lot of this stuff might be offset if you've got meaningful networks and supportive networks. And I think Dom from Hope Street recommended a book recently about, like, without connection, a lot of these things come from because we're not finding meaning and connection in our lives. I think there's a big...
No, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And I think that, like, finding the job that you feel good at, and living with people you feel good with, and being with people you feel good with, that's a huge part of it too. Just for anyone, it doesn't matter whether you're being diagnosed or anything, but I think the hobbies as well, as you said earlier, finding your own things that you love doing, they can be really good and help you to navigate things. And one of the things I like about this pod is just speaking to people and just sharing stories. And I think your stories,
it's good because what it does is it puts an experience out there to people, and hopefully, like, they can listen to it and go, well, do you know what? I'm in that same position, and I can see that there's progression there. That people can progress and get out of it. It's not all darkness and hopefulness. Do you know what I mean? It's you can see that someone's been in the same situation and moved on. And I think that's the biggest part of it. And I think I see that with Hope Street. When you see people come through the door for the first time, they're very unsure about themselves and about how they can cope with things. Do you know what I mean? But after a few weeks, you see them sort of lift and become the person that they actually are.
Yeah, I was saying the same thing to Ian when Ian, a couple of weeks ago on an earlier podcast, when he first came in. He was obviously going through a tough time, and now he just looks so much more lighter on his feet, etc.
Yeah,
I'd
agree with that. Yeah,
you can see it, can't you?
Listen,
have a wonderful Christmas, Ste, and all the best for 2023. I'm going to see you with Hope Street meetings over the next few weeks. But I think your story, I wanted to speak to someone who'd been sectioned, and you're very open about it and say, yeah, here's what happened. There's a lot of shame for some people, and I think we need to talk about these things and get it out there, and know about these things, and know that it's not necessarily something which will be horrible. You can get good, not that people want to spend time in institutions like that, but there's hope. They'll help you. There's ways that you can navigate these tough times and come out the other end smiling. But it's great to hear that you're feeling so good anyway, moving forward, and that all's well.
Cheers, buddy.
Is there anything else you want to mention before we conclude? I think we've covered most of it.
No. I think all you got to do is be open and be honest with yourself. The main thing you need to be is be honest with yourself. I think that's the biggest thing that you need to do. If you're not honest with yourself, you can't be honest with anybody. And I think that's where you can fall on a downward spiral. So be honest with yourself. If you're feeling bad, talk. Yeah. That's the main thing to do, is talk. It doesn't matter who you speak to, as long as someone's out there and you think, all right, I'll give them a bell. I'm not feeling too good. I'll give them a bell and see what they think on what's going on. And it's always good to get different people's perspective of things. Do you know what I mean? Because you might be pig-headed and think, oh, hang on a minute, this is the way I'm going to do it. But you're not taking any other people's views in consideration in certain things. So, talk. That's the thing. That's the only thing I can say. Do you know what I mean? The stigma is going. There's a lot of people coming forward now and saying, well, yeah, I've suffered from this and I'm suffering from that. And it's doing them the world of good.
Yeah, good stuff. And so get out there, talk, be honest with yourself, and keep the faith, have that hope that things can get better. Ste, thanks for telling us your story. If anyone wants to come on and share their stories on the podcast, Wellbeing, I also do creativity, history, politics, financial survival. Feel free. Following me on TikTok and Twitter, and support the podcast in any way you can. Share it. Come to Hope Street meetings. Details are in the notes, or just get involved in the network. There's a lot of online stuff with Hope Street. And talk to people, folks, this Christmas, particularly if you're alone. And Steve, you mentioned that you have a certain time of year where you're not as good. Is it usually in the winter months, or?
Yeah, the winter months with me. Yeah. It is, the winter months. When it goes dark, I'm not good around, dark nights and things like that. Bonfire nights, obviously, for certain reasons. New Year's Eve is another one, when people set off those silly fireworks. So those are bad times for me.
Yeah, I invested in a sad lamp a few years ago to help me with the winter. I do find it useful. They're quite cheap now and they replicate daylight. But people out there, just be aware that, winter can be tough, and there's reasons for that because we're not getting as much natural light. So hang in there. If you can support the podcast in any way, please do, share, etc. If you can contribute financially for the cost of a cup of coffee once a month, it makes a big difference to taking this project forward. Ste, thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.
Cheers, buddy.